Hi, and welcome to Nothing is Rocket Science, a podcast where we talk about the nuances of all things scientific and science related. Today we have with us Dr. Utkarshaa Varshney. I'm sorry, did I get your name right? Yeah. Um, she's a solar energy researcher who's trained in India, US, and Australia. Utkarsha completed a bachelor degree in electrical engineering from Aligarh Muslim University in India, pursued her master's in materials engineering from Stony Brook University in the US, and went on to pursue her PhD in solar energy technology from University of New South Wales in Australia. She is currently working as a research impact analyst at Reliable, Affordable, Clean Energy. It's called the RACE 2030 in Australia. In addition to her intensive research expertise, she is also a science communicator. She practices this on social media. She's written a lot of articles, and she's also been invited for numerous radio interviews and was featured on the Science Show on the ABC network. So, welcome to the podcast, Utkarsha.
Hi, Sandhya. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Right. Before we actually get into talking about what solar energy and solar panels, uh, can you tell us about what got you interested in energy conservation and solar energy in particular?
Right. So that's really a good question, and takes me back a good 5, 6, 7 years back in time.
Hmm.
So I started my undergrad, and I'm an electrical engineer by profession. So I started engineering back home in India, and heavy like electrical engineering in India is still quite a heavy engineering. So we learn a lot about generators and transformers and induction motors and like big, huge, giant things. Um, it was fascinating in the beginning, but I got bored of it fairly quickly. I hope none of my professors are listening to this. Um, yeah, so like the reason behind that was those things have been one and all the same for quite some time. So I felt like there's nothing new or innovative about those things. And then like at that time, clean energy and climate change and global warming was like a really hot burning topic. And like being electrical engineers, we had a course in renewable energy. And yeah, that course came at the right time to me, and I just loved everything about it. Yeah, so like that was something which gave me that inspiration of, yeah, life is not just all about those big giant things which have been in the electrical sector for a long, long, long time. So for the reason I really liked solar was solar panels have always fascinated me back, even like back when I started, because I mean, it's just like a little something which is on your roof of somebody's farm. They're not moving, they're not rotating, they're not doing anything. Still, they're doing their job. So, I mean,
Hmm.
that was something which was very, very different in solar panels than any other things. Like when you see wind turbines, you see something is moving. Sorry. When you see dams, you see that, okay, water is flowing. So something is happening. Whereas with PV or like photovoltaics or solar, as we call it, they are very, very simple beings, which with no movement, no rotation, nothing, but still they are doing their job. So
Hmm.
they fascinated me big time, and they still fascinate me after a good 7, 8 years being in the field.
That's interesting. Um, And are you passionate about sustainability? And did that also contribute to, taking up this decision?
I'm actually extremely passionate about it, not just with the professional life. Personally,
Hmm.
also, I'm very, very passionate about the environment. I'm very careful about what I do and what impact will it have on the environment. Like there are so many things. I think I'll take this opportunity just to tell people that there is like
Please,
even
yeah.
if you're not engineers, you like even if you cannot generate electricity, everyone can save it. So
Right.
at least do that part. Don't waste it. If there are small things that you can contribute towards the planet. Try to carry your own bags when you go for grocery shopping. If you are the only person going to office that day, try not to take your car sometimes and take a public transport. I mean, I'm careful saying it because it's COVID time, and that might not be the best health practice in a lot of different parts of the world at the moment, but generally speaking, like try not to take single vehicles when you are the only one driving. Try to take your trains and buses, and yeah, I mean, don't waste water. There are so many things that even like a normal people who are not from the science profession can do to help the environment, because the planet is not just ours, it's everybody's.
Right, right. Um, can you tell us a little bit about the various alternative energy resources? Like we will be talking about solar in particular, but if you can give us, the different alternative energy resources that are actually available.
Sure. So with the word going to decarbonization, there's a lot of alternate energy sources, or rather clean energy sources. So when we say the term clean, clean is about they not affecting the environment as much as fossil fuels, like coal, natural gas used to. So clean is they're cleaner to the environment. So that's where the clean factor comes in. So some of the clean energy sources is solar is very predominant, because the reason behind it has been a little bit more economic than scientific. So since a lot of research has been put into solar research for the last 10 years, 20 years, that has drawn down their cost significantly over the last decade. So it has reduced by more than 100% in just a decade. So that is the reason why solar became extremely prominent throughout the world. Other than solar, there are other resources like wind energy. So wind energy is very, very important for the countries that have like a very high wind potential. So for them, like not every country might have the same level of sunshine, but they might have wind. So therefore, there are so many other resources. Other than that, there are things like hydro energy or pumped hydro, that is creating electricity from water. Or beyond that, there are things like bio waste or bioenergy. So utilizing waste to create energy. So all these things have a little lower carbon impact than what the oil and natural gas and coal used to have back in the day.
So it's like you're not depleting the Earth's resources to, make up, to make alternative energy or like,
Yeah,
bring
that's right.
electricity. Hmm.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's more like the problem with coal is actually twofold. One, we don't have it as an infinite resource. So it's
Right.
not like if we continue to consume coal at the rate that we were consuming 5 years down the track, we don't have like cannot do it till infinite time. So that is one problem. The second problem is they emit a lot of carbon dioxide that warms the planet significantly, and that is
Right.
like a really big problem. So that is like one of the cons of the industrialization that has been in the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah. Um, I think we could like, coming to your territory basically. Um, can you tell us a little bit about, the solar panels? Because I'm pretty like I don't want to say what is solar energy. I'm pretty sure everybody knows it because, it's been practiced in a lot of countries and people are aware of solar panels. But I think all of us would want to know what exactly is happening. What do these solar panels contain, and how do they convert solar energy to electrical energy that we use in our houses or in the industrial setup, etc.
Right. Okay. Um, okay. Great question. So, what exactly are solar panels made up of? Is the first question.
Hmm.
So, solar start with silicon. So, silicon is nothing but a very, very purified form of sand.
Yes.
So, the first thing is we have a lot more sand than we have coal. So, that is like one positive thing about solar in the first place when you begin. So, yeah, so it starts with like a very pure block of silicon, and silicon is actually a semiconductor, so it's not a good conductor of electricity. So to make it a good conductor of electricity, we add something in silicon to make it more conductive.
Hmm.
Uh, Once that happens, it's still very shiny. So the next thing to do is you need to put something which will block the reflection of sunlight from that surface. Because if the sunlight comes and it goes, you're not capturing anything, so nothing's going to happen anyway.
Right.
So the next significant step is to create something that we call as surface passivation layers. So the
Mm.
passivation layers, they serve dual purpose. So one is they reduce the amount of sunlight that will reflect from the silicon surface, which
Mm.
means that you'll be absorbing a lot more. So that is the
Mm.
first purpose. The second purpose is they provide a lot of additional benefits to the problems that silicon has that we call defects in silicon. So once that structure is ready, that's so one of the reason is why the solar panel or most of the solar panels that you see are blue in color. So the reason behind that blue color is one of those, or the topmost passivation layer is what gives it the blue color. And the blue color is like, if I can be a little bit more technical, it's the film called silicon nitride. So that
Mm-hmm.
silicon nitride is the topmost layer for pretty much all industrial cells at the moment. And that's why
Mm.
most of the cells or most of the panels that you see are blue in color.
Oh, so okay, it some of them look a bit on the side of black or like a dark gray, but they're actually blue in color.
They actually might as well be black and gray, but I'm talking about
Okay.
like 95% of the productions, 95% of the
Mm.
production, because silicon nitride is the dominant passivation layer for the industry at the moment. And that's why
Okay.
most of them are blue. So now that's the cell part. Once you have that solar cell, we combine them together into a panel. So because the amount of electricity that comes out of a cell will be really, really small, and like you'll not be able to use it for anything. So
Mm.
then we combine all those cells electrically together to create solar panels. And then if you join a lot of solar panels, we call it a solar system, which can power a house or power an office and things like that.
Right. Um, so how does so how what retains the solar energy? Like how do these cells absorb and they retain the energy in them?
Right. So they don't since they cannot retain it permanently. So
Mm-hmm.
one challenge for like the PV researchers is you need to capture that electricity before the electrons go off. And that is again like one of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons why passivation layers came into picture. You need to like make sure that whatever you're catching before before the two electrons join and it vanishes, it's better to just capture it because that's where your electricity
Right, right. So it does all the capturing during the day, and then it retains that energy for a particular time period, and then it has to get activated in you know the following day, basically.
Not true. So for the
Okay.
following day, you'll need some sort of a battery. So the thing with
Uh,
solar is if you don't have a battery, you need to either use that electricity that is generated at the same time, or
mhm,
if you have a grid connected system, you can sell the surplus to the grid. If you need to like save or store the energy, which has let's say you have a bright sunny day today, and like the solar is working really well because of the sunshine. But you don't need electricity today, you need it tomorrow. So to store that energy, you will need what we call as battery. And
mhm,
that is an intensive area of research at the moment because we have very good solar panels, they're very cheap. The bigger problem now is we need batteries, which can come in any form. Like electric vehicles are also one form of the battery.
right,
Like if you don't need the electricity that your panels are generating today, you might as well charge your car if you have an electric vehicle.
right.
So a lot of those things are like clean energy sector is a very interconnected sector. So you cannot just play around in one way and forget about the other things because there are a lot of things that are very, very immensely connected with each other.
Mm. And how long can you store this energy, like, with the battery? So how long can, say, for example, I have solar panels at home. So if not at an industrial level, because I'm pretty sure they have like really strong batteries, but at the level of residence and stuff. So how long can I store the solar energy and then like use it for electricity.
Right. So, like, since batteries are still not as cheap as the panels are, like, the
Hmm.
cost that I'm talking about that has come down significantly is more for solar panels than it is for batteries. So, for
Oh,
most
okay.
people, that is the reason why, like, you'll see that not a lot of people who have solar panels on their rooftops. So in
Mm,
situations like that, people are like at the moment, since they're not very like since the batteries are not very cheap, the best they can do is to connect it with the grid and sell it to the grid. That
okay.
creates another problem. So that's not as smooth as it sounds because our grids, be it like you're talking to me from Boston and I'm here in Australia, so be it your grid or ours, most of our grids have been very, very old. And the reason why why I'm considering them being old because they were actually created for just one-way transmission. Because when the grids were connected, there was just one source of electricity, which was fossil. In terms of fossil fuels, the only role the grids used to play was the grid supplying electricity to the people's house. They would
Mm,
never be created to do the other way around. Problem because with be it PV or hydro or wind energy, since people have started to generate more, they have started to sell it back. And that is what we call it, creating a lot of grid congestion. And the decarbonization of the grid is a very, very significant problem in the clean energy sector.
mm, interesting. Yeah.
Solve one problem, create the other one.
Right. Yeah, and if you can, tell us about your research, like, your PhD research, and what did you research on, and how have they been, implemented, and what are the applications of that?
Right. Okay. So what I was working on, I was like, as I mentioned about passivation layers, I was trying to solve a problem that silicon is like not a very ideal sort of like it's not the most ideal thing ever. So with solar cells, there are something that we call as defects in silicon. So these
Mm-hmm.
defects are the problems that will reduce the amount of electricity that your cells will generate. So one of those problems is something called LETID, which stands for line the temperature used.
Oh, just a minute. Your voice is actually breaking. I don't know if it's
How is it
just.
better now?
Yeah, it's better. I think you'll probably have to get closer. Yeah,
No, no worries. Yeah.
yeah, this
So
is
I
good.
was working on a defect that is called light and elevated temperature induced degradation. So
Mm-hmm.
what happens is when the solar panels are out in the sun for like let's say a few years in the beginning, as they start to heat up, they their performance start to degrade, and that's where that
Mm-hmm.
degradation factor came in. So what I was doing is I was trying to solve that problem for the industrial cells by playing around with different passivation layers. So, like as I mentioned, that you see most of the solar cells as blue. I have seen solar cells in all different colors because I was playing around with passivation layers. So I've seen them in yellow, green, pink, you name it. So yeah, like I think one easy way for me to tell how those things work is like the way that I've actually used in the past ones. That if you don't know how solar cells work, you can imagine solar cells as your pizzas. So as
Mm-hmm.
pizza has a base of a dough, silicon solar cells have a base of silicon. So that's where it starts. Then, like as you have a lot of toppings in your pizzas, those toppings for solar cells are those passivation layers that I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And as your pizzas, like you cannot keep your pizzas for like 3 weeks and you imagine them tasting the same. So in the same way, like as the solar panels are out and about in the sun for a few years, they also start to degrade fundamentally due to some issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Right.
I'm there. Sorry, my video is yeah acting up.
No worries. Yeah. So yeah, where was I? Okay. Yeah. So like that's why so they also like once they are out and about in the sun, they start to degrade after like 2 to 3 years. So now as like since there like with different toppings, different the taste and the flavors change in the same manner as you change the passivation layers, the properties also change. So what I found was, if you put, like, let's say if your pizzas don't taste the same, if you put pepperoni first or sauce first. So in the same manner, I was trying to work that, and I found that if you reduce the thickness of those layers, you can reduce the degradation factor. So indirectly
Mm,
saying that if you reduce, like if you apply a little less tomato sauce on your pizzas, they might stay a little longer, not being soggy.
right,
Like it's not 100% the same thing, but it's easier for you to understand what I'm trying to say.
right.
So yes, I found like a couple of solutions for the industry, which none of them actually will cost them any additional cost, because in one case I'm reducing the thickness, I'm not increasing that. And if you reduce anything, you're not adding up anything on top of it. Another solution was, I was like, I tried two different layers, and what I saw was if you flip the structure of two layers, the degradation is reduced. So it's like saying if you apply sauce first and cheese later, it might
Hmm.
taste different than if you reverse the order. So yeah, so that's pizza and solar cells for you.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting analogy, and easy for everyone to actually understand the comparison. That's actually a very interesting analogy. Um,
I I never saw my pizzas the same again.
right. Yeah, just when you think that they're unhealthy, it becomes a really good example to explain something very complicated, I guess.
Yeah.
So when you were playing around with these cells that you're talking about in different colors, so did you have to use different materials, or whether the same materials but just came in different colors?
Right. So that color thing actually matters, like depends on a lot of things. So when I was just changing the thickness, so even if I'm using the same material but changing the thickness of it, the color will be different. And
Mm,
again, like when it comes down to why most of the cells are blue in color, because the industry has a standard thickness for that material.
mm,
So that means that for every industry in the world and every factory that's creating solar cells, they are aware about the thickness of that material, and
mm,
therefore all of them look pretty much the same, but because they should.
mm. And how do you decide how many panels you want for a for a particular house or for an apartment? So how do you decide that?
Right. Okay. So just to give you a layman answer, it will depend on two things. So one, the amount of space that you have on your rooftop, so how big
Mm,
it is, and number two, how much money are you ready to spend at the moment, because it will cost
mm,
some money. So
right.
in layman terms, it's as simple as that. If you have like if you need that, like if you think that I can put like a 5 kilowatt system and I have $5,000 to spend, might as well do it tomorrow. How to know it scientifically? So in that case, we have a lot of softwares in different parts of the world. Like US has theirs. Here we have a tool called Sunspot, and like with such tools, you can just provide your address, and the tool will some sort of map your rooftop to tell you how much of panels or how big a system can you apply. So
Mm,
if you have that much of money to spend, I mean your roof might be huge, and you like the system might say that you can install a 10 kilowatt system, but you're just two people at home, so it doesn't make much sense to have a 10 kilowatt system.
mm,
So yeah, all these things play an important role. In addition to that, there's also about what kind of facing your roof is. I mean, for some people, it might not be at the right side, so you might not get enough sunshine. So
right.
that's why it's always good to like sit with somebody and ask them like for suggestions if you're not sure, because I mean mature is quite a strong word. We are still like we are now a relatively mature industry. So the problems are not what they.
Mm. And do are there places, I mean, in any part of the world where, like, even if it's an independent standalone house, where, you don't have the regular electricity and everything runs purely on solar? Have we come to the point where at least one house or maybe like one factory or someplace runs purely on solar with no alternative, source of electricity.
I'm not 100% sure about the entire house, but in a lot of developing countries, the problem in the beginning was like, as I was talking about the grid. So the grids were actually pretty good. I mean, without defaming them,
Mhm.
most of the countries, the grids are really powerful things in like very big countries in most cases. But there's still like in developing countries, there have been like some communities to which the grid transmission was not possible. So for such places, having solar electricity can be like a big blessing because like
Mm.
if there are let's say there are just 5 houses 500 kilometers off to Boston. So there's
Mhm.
no point for this for the US government to actually create like put transmission lines for just those 5 houses. So the
Mhm.
best case scenario in such situation is to provide those 5 houses some sort of solar panels so they can generate their own electricity and use it. So it will be
Mm.
helpful for them because they will not be deprived of electricity. It will be good for the government because you don't have to pay a lot of money for just a handful of houses
Right.
and not polluting the environment, which is always a plus.
Right. Right. And is there hope where we can almost replace, the current electricity, or at least to an extent, like 70 to 80%, which I think is still phenomenal.
Yeah.
Can we replace that with solar? Like, is research heading towards that?
Um, yes and no. The reason behind is yes, there is a lot of research going not just in solar, but throughout like the clean energy sector. We are working very hard to actually replace or somewhat compensate the bad things that have happened to the planet and the environment. So that is one way of looking at it. Uh, is it possible? It is definitely possible, but at that case, it's not just solar or wind and electricity. There are, like
Uh,
as I mentioned about things, there will be a lot of other external factors that need to support it, be it things like government policies or the grid or electric vehicles and transportation, electrification of transportation. Transportation sector is a huge contributor towards greenhouse gas emissions.
hmm,
So be it electric cars, electric buses, maybe eventually electric trains. With all these things being changed, I mean, the 70%, 80% scenario is absolutely possible. But there will be like it's not just on the research sector to make it possible, is what I'm trying to say. I mean,
right.
we can provide the structure and the base for that, but there will be like a lot of additional factors and additional and external parameters that will be helpful or not be helpful in making that happen.
Right. And, like you probably rightly said, it could not just be solar, it could be a mix of solar and, hydro, other wind energy. So it could be like a combination of,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right,
And
to
it,
reduce
I
the
mean, it
load.
should rather be a combination because for different
Hmm.
countries, the things that will work for them will be different. Like, not
Right.
everybody, like, I'm very fortunate I'm sitting in Sydney. It's a beautiful day because we have a wonderful sunshine here in Australia.
Hmm.
But not every part of the country, like, not every part of the world will have the same level of sunshine or the same level of
Right.
wind. So we really need to think about having a combination or a goal combination of these things that can serve the purpose because all of them are pretty much serving the purpose of the planet.
Hmm. Right. Um, and when you talk about solar, the first question that comes to everybody's mind is how does weather impact the performance of the solar panels? Like, be it like even if you take a country like India, sometimes it's, when it rains, you don't have a lot of sunshine, you have a lot of gray skies. And so how does the weather, even if you take a very ideal country, with like no extreme temperatures, at least extreme in terms of cold weathers,
Right,
how does weather impact the performance of solar panels?
right. That's a very interesting question and a pretty common one, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So, sunshine is like that goes without saying very good for the panels. On the other hand, believe it or not, temperature is not good. So, we need light, we don't need heat.
Mm-hmm.
So, as the temperature, I mean, there is a threshold temperature. anything beyond that temperature, you'll start losing the performance really quickly.
Interesting.
So that is something that shocks a lot of people, because like if generally, like, people think that if you need a lot of sun, you might like the panels might like the heat of it as well.
Summer. Right.
That's not true. So
Mm-hmm.
we need places where the sunshine is good, so the light part of the sun is great, but it's not very hot, because the
Mm-hmm.
hotness is not great. On the
Right.
other hand, in the times when like it's raining or it's clouded, so it's not like let's say it's a very rainy day. So unless it's absolutely horrible weather, even having like some sort of cloudiness will create some sort of an electricity. It's not that the panels will not work at all. They will not work as much as they would work in the summertime, but
Mm-hmm.
they will still work. So for situations like that, only, I mean, that's one of the reason why at the moment we suggest having grid connected system, which means if you have a good day and your panels are generating electricity, like use your own generated electricity. But for the times when, like, in case you don't have a battery, I'm talking about the households that don't have a battery. If you have a battery, then it's a separate problem or a
Right.
separate scenario. But like for the windy days or for the days when it's raining very heavily and there's no sun, you might not, like, the solar panels might not generate enough to bear the load of the entire house. I mean, you might still get something for, let's say, your kitchen supplies, or let's say for one of the room in the house, but not enough. So in such situations, having a grid connected system will be helpful, because you always have a fallback option.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, that is something that like I didn't know, and I'm pretty sure not a lot of us know that. You assume that you're from a hot country, like the solar panels performance would be great in a hot country, but yeah, we didn't know that the temperature aspect of it that also affects the performance. That's interesting. Do you have temperature control systems on the panel too? Like, that kind of cools down the temperature or something?
Not really internally, no. Like, we don't have anything within the solar cells that will cool them down, because that might end up uh, being a negative thing. So
Mm-hmm.
internally, no, we don't have anything. But in most cases, like, even for the very hot countries, they don't, like, when I talk about hot for cells is like really hot. So it's like it will not degrade a lot, but let's say anything beyond 27, 28 degrees, the performance start to reduce a little bit.
Okay. So,
And like, I mean, and also like different countries have different solutions for that. So if floating solar, for the countries that don't have a lot of land, they have started to build solar panels, create solar systems on water. So
on water.
Japan is like a very good example of that. They're doing something what we call as floating solar. So that floating solar will actually serve one of this purpose, because since there is water underneath and like panels are standing like that, the water will help with
Cool.
as a coolant. Yeah.
That's interesting. And I've seen a lot of these panels in different shapes. Like, there's a flower shape or like a butterfly. And is it is there a reason why they're shaped like that, or is just like it solves a purpose and it also looks fancy?
The latter, most probably, because
Okay.
not everybody likes the rectangular, boring shapes.
Mm.
So for most of the reasons, like lot of a big part of solar not being loved 5 years ago was they don't like people don't seem to like how they look very much. So
Mm.
now that the solution to that problem is you have a lot of different fancy ways of making them look pretty. Like now we have entire solar facades, which actually looks transparent. So it pretty much just looks like
Right.
a window. So that problem has been solved. So yeah, so like the reasons, if you're seeing that flower shapes and stuff like that, they're pretty much just the aesthetic.
Aesthetic. Okay. And I think the awareness about this is also getting better with time. Like, 10 years ago, I could probably see them maybe one house in a particular area. But now I do see a good number of places and industry. I'm not sure about industries, but definitely residences have started using both these. Like they have one or two rooms, like you said, like connected to solar and government, I think, is also encouraging the use of this by providing,
Subsidies.
waivers and subsidies and things like that. Yes.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, the reason behind that is actually twofold. So awareness part has definitely helped because for a long time, I mean, even today, but for a long, long time, a lot of people didn't believe in global warming and carbon emissions and stuff like that. I mean, that's still a problem, but it has
Yeah.
been reduced than what it was 10 years ago. So one part is the awareness part, but second part is cost reduction has helped a lot.
Hmm.
It generally helped the industry because if you can put forward a proposal to someone saying that if you have like if you'll get a solar system on your rooftop, your bills will significantly reduce. It's a no-brainer that they say yes.
Mm,
So that cost and price coming down has played an immense role in creating that awareness to the people.
right. Yeah. And I think, yeah, it's chicken and egg, right? Like, one is the cost, and it's also like the more number of units they start producing, and they can, also reduce the cost. So,
It definitely
yeah.
is. And I mean, as you mentioned, governments have actually like in different countries in different capacities, but they have definitely helped with tariffs and subsidies. And
Mm,
so I think I would strongly like to say that government policies will be a very, very important part of how things go in the future in terms of decarbonization.
mm,
So their role is pretty strong because policies drive a lot of these things. When I mean, this is not a personal one person, two person, or a community problem. It's a global problem, and
right.
therefore, it does need big solutions as well.
Right. I know we've touched upon this in some of in our various questions, but if you can like narrow down, how does this benefit the environment? Like we've been talking about the carbon footprint and like other things, but overall, like what are the different ways that this benefits the environment and eventually the global warming?
Right. I would say the biggest is what it was, which is the carbon emission reduction. So what happens is when we extract coal or when we mine coal, and we use it. So, like I think I mentioned that with coal, the problem is twofold. One
Right.
is it's very finite in its amount. So it's not an infinite resource. So if we keep consuming coal or oil or natural gas the way that we have been doing over the past few decades, we'll not have anything to burn after 50 years. So that is one big problem. So if you can foresee that something will not be there in like 40 years, 50 years, you better start creating something that can be used after that time. So that is one part of it. Second part of it is, and like a bigger one, is the climate change. The climate change is we're trying to, like after the Paris Agreement, we're trying, like all of us on particularly the developed nations, we really need to think about like nature is not just about giving. We
Right.
need to like keep it going for us to keep going. So that part is like really important. So if you stop using the energy sources or the electricity sources that are bad for the environment, then I mean, it's pretty much increasing the longevity of survival.
Mm,
So it's not just about or our kids might not see the Great Barrier Reef or might not see other things. It's more like now the evidence is so clear. Like it's be it bushfires in Australia, or be it enormous floods, or
right.
like it's very very clear because 5 years back people were like, oh, I don't care if my kids didn't see something. Like I also didn't see a lot of things that my parents saw. So that was the argument of people who didn't believe in the phenomenon. And but now like it's pretty much evident. So like the future that we used to talk about is now. Like this is the future,
Right.
and if we don't act now, it doesn't seem very bright going forward. So yeah, it is it's not just do if you like it, it's a necessary. It's a
Right.
necessity. So if you don't do it, yeah, the consequences don't look very pleasant.
Right. And, with things changing so rapidly, I think, for 40, 50 years still sounds like a long time. I'm pretty sure we can, start seeing the effects of this,
Much
and,
sooner.
much sooner. Yeah, exactly. Like, the we're seeing unprecedented floods and like, cyclones and some of the bushfires that we're talking about, and US also sees a lot of these wildfires. I mean,
California.
California wildfires. I'm not saying I like some part of it is definitely because of global warming. Like you can't attribute that purely to
Sure.
climate change. There are it's a collection of different reasons, but global
Multiple.
warming is one of that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Um, another question that I had in mind was, you know, can someone who uses, as someone who uses solar energy and have a lot of solar panels, uh, can they send the surplus electricity or that energy to another person's place or like to a grid so that it's not wasted?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and the answer is yes. So in most cases, with the grid connected solar systems, if you have the surplus electricity, you can send it back to the grid, and the
Mm.
grid can pay you money for that electricity because they can use it to
Mm.
sell it to the other people. The first part of the question that you asked, that if let's say I have a solar panel system on my roof and my neighbor doesn't have, can I send it directly? So that is something that is still in the developing phase because
Mm.
I mean that's not how it works. It's not like a two-way connector. It's like the grid, like as I was mentioning, the grid have was designed to be in the single flow thing. It's just like this is the grid, this will be sending you electricity from here to here. And now what's
Mhm.
happening is they are getting it back. So there are a lot of problems that we need to solve as like pretty much every nation because most of the grids are in the world are extremely old. So the problem with the grid is, yeah, I think now like the bigger challenge for us now is to create that grids of the future that can actually accept as much as they can deliver.
Mm. Okay, so you just send this up, and the panel does this by itself. Like it knows that this is
Yeah,
surplus, and then it does
yeah.
it. Oh, okay, that's
Yeah, so for
interesting.
the most of the grid connected systems, they work that way that if you have the surplus, you can send it back. And if you
Mm.
are lacking, or like as we were talking about before, if it's a rainy day and you don't have enough, you can drive it from the grid. So it's an automatic process.
Oh, wow. Okay. And is it connected to the electricity board? Do they know that you're using a combination of this? Okay, okay,
Yes, so they
that's
do because your electricity bills will be depending on
on
how
that.
much you sent it back and how much you purchased from them.
Mm.
So it's a very clear sort of process. So there's no stealing in between. I mean, in most cases.
Okay. Okay. That's pretty, yeah, that's interesting. Um, can you tell us a little bit about, your current job profile and what exactly are you, involved in and what are your projects?
All right. Okay. So I completed my PhD early this year or late last year in December. Uh, then for the last 4 months, I've been working with a corporate research center called Race for 2030. So RACE is an acronym for Reliable, Affordable, Clean Energy for 2030. So we are
Mm.
funded by the Australian Commonwealth Government. So we have about 80 industry partners. So those partners and the Commonwealth combinedly have funded us with both like like in kind and cash funds, of a total of about $350 million for the next 10 years.
Mm.
And what we do is we fund the research projects based on themes that we are working on. So our CRC is divided into 4 different programs. So we talk about race for business, race for homes, race for networks, and race for everyone. So we are not just focusing on generating clean energy. We are actually talking about the entire economy being decarbonized. So the problems with the networks, like as we were talking about the grid and as the distributed energy generations are increasing, we need to solve the problem of distribution and transmission. Then for business, the problems are different because they need a large amount of electricity. For the residences, the problems are different because some people might have ACs and heaters and stuff like that. And for the fourth program, what we call as Race for Everyone is there are other societal problems that technology sometimes sort of neglect. So in that program, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create the future energy workforce. Like clean energy sector is changing at a rapid pace. So like for the 5 years down the lane, the engineers that we are creating today will be people who will be taking it forward. So we're creating the clean energy workforce of the future. We'll be funding a lot of PhD students in the next 10 years of our time. Yeah, we're also trying to work on creating better forecast and foresight and creating more net zero pathways. Yeah, so like pretty much everything that you can imagine in a clean energy sector, we are a part of it one way or the other.
So yeah, so you're not only working with industries, but you're also like you're not only funding industries, but also like students who are pursuing research and or like startups who have who have these ideas. Okay,
Yeah, boosting a lot of startups is also a very strong component of the company. So yeah,
that's yeah, definitely. I think funding is that's one of the main reasons why a lot of startups or a lot of ideas do take off.
yeah.
And I'm glad to know that there are companies who exist to actually fund people for these kind of projects. So it's kind of like Shark Tank, right? Like you have people come and pitch to you, and then you decide these are the ones are effective, and then you fund them. That's
Right.
really
It's
interesting.
actually it's much bigger and broader than Shark Tank. So Shark
Hmm.
Tank is similar to what in Australia we have something called Energy Lab. So
Hmm.
that's where the startups go for the funding. So they have to pitch and then they fund it. For us,
Right.
it's much broader. So bolstering startups is just like one part of what we do. For us, it's about helping researchers in improving, like let's see, like we have some sort of targets. So for us, like we're trying to fund research in reducing electricity bills for households, reduce electricity bills for businesses, then reduce carbon dioxide emissions is huge. Like we're trying to minimize at least uh, 20 million tons by the end of this decade. And we're trying to like provide energy savings of about at least $4 billion by the end of 2030.
Wow.
So yeah, so all these combined together, like we have a lot of different aspects of how we work. So startups is just like one part of it. Other than that,
Mm.
it's a lot of research in a
Research.
lot of different energy sector.
Mm. Interesting. Um, Before we, move on to the other aspect of science communication, is there something that you want to add, or something you think that our general audience should know about, solar panels, or anything that you want to, tell the audience?
Right. I think you have covered pretty much everything.
Okay, great. Um, so the next aspect of this is one of my favorite parts. It's about science communication, which is the agenda of these kind of podcasts. So I ask this question to all my guests who actively practice science communication: is what is your idea? What is your personal definition for science communication?
Like, what does science communication mean to me?
Mean to you? Yes.
Right. Okay. So I think the reason why I entered into science communication was I think science is something that has been and that will always affect everybody. If you need to accept it or not is up to the individual. So
Mm.
science communication scientists cannot drive the society. All we can do is we can give you the tools, but you have to use them. So
Right.
science communication for me is actually tell people the science in English terms, not science terms.
Right. Um, and can you also tell us some of your, some of your work that you've done on science communication, like your written articles and, some of the interviews that you did, or if you have any ongoing projects?
Right. Okay. So during my PhD, actually, that was a big part of like what I was doing, because I always used to think, like, since I was working on solar cell device level physics, which not a lot of people know about, because like the first thing when you think about solar comes to mind is solar panels. For
Mm.
me, that solar panel is a very like it takes like 5 steps to reach there.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so I always like used to take time to think about what I'm doing. How will that impact anybody outside of the solar research community? So that's where like that's how I came into science communication. One competition that actually helped me significantly in starting their journey was something that we called a 3-minute thesis.
Mm.
So 3-minute thesis is like a global competition for PhD researchers everywhere, where they are asked, rather we are asked to present 3 years, 4 years of our research in 3 minutes
Mm.
and in a language that a high school student can understand. So a
Right.
PhD level research toned down to somebody who, I mean, you never know, they might be a history graduate
Right.
who know nothing about what we do. So that has actually like it has given me a very different perspective of what research is and what it does and why it's important for everybody. Doesn't matter what you do, what you study. So that was
Mm.
my first experience with science communication, like the 3-minute thesis competition. After that, I have done a bunch of radio interviews. I was also did it for the science show in Australia, which is like a big ABC running show for quite some time now. I've also written a lot of science communication articles because that was like it. So science communication articles are very different than our peer-reviewed journal papers
Right.
that we write as researchers. Both of them have their fun bits, but yeah. So I've written like a lot of science communication articles for multiple blogs. One of like the most recent one was for a blog called Bolded Science. So yeah, like I was trying to convey solar in a very layman terms, just so everyone can understand it. Because, like as I mentioned before as well, it's not just our home; it's everybody's homes and everybody's responsibility.
Right. And how did you come up with the pizza, analogy? Like,
Right. Okay.
what was that? What was that aha moment that?
That's a That's a good question, actually. So I always used to, so I love pizzas. I mean, not just for the analogy. I'm a big pizza person.
Mhm.
So I love it. So first of all, so I was like, since I was working on passivation layers. So one day I was just like thinking how to explain, and like they are the topmost things on a cell. And yeah, I mean it was like quite random. I was not trying to come up with an analogy, but since it's the topmost layers, I was thinking about toppings in some way, and with toppings the pizza was the first thing that came into my mind, and I was like,
Mm.
that could be a good explanation, like tell people, because not everybody understands solar cells, but everybody understands pizza. So
Pizza. Yeah,
it was
that's
it
true.
was it was like a
And
difficult road from there, but
yeah, pizza is universal. Like it's universal language,
it
definitely.
definitely is.
Um, and what is your opinion, or like what is your experience about you know women in science in particular? Like what
Right.
are your opinions and what are your observations?
Uh, I think women in like the representation of women in science has significantly improved, particularly in the research sector, at least.
Mm.
So it has improved significantly, but we still have a long way to go. Also, like when people talk about why, like women in science, women in energy, or women in any kind of engineering sectors, the representation is still less. And I always say that equality is not the problem, because I mean, men and women, like people who say that they are equal, I don't think they're equal. They are two very different species who actually get or bring very different things to the table. And
Yeah.
that's why you need them. I mean, the reason why you need gender equality is not because the two genders are equal, but because they think very differently, they're trained very differently, their experiences over life have been very different, and that is why you need that perspective. Like, I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but I'm also not saying that they're equal. They are
Right.
they think very differently. I mean, it's a fundamental difference of the gender. And like as much as we need that gender non-biased structure everywhere, we need it in energy, like big time, because energy sector is changing so rapidly that if we don't catch the train now, we'll definitely gonna miss it in like a year or two for sure. It's
Mm.
like, especially the clean energy sector, it's changing like literally every day something new is happening.
Mm.
So it's insane. So that gender problem that was there in the science fields still there. Like, I'm not saying that the problem is solved. We have made some progress, but we still have a long way to go, and it's something that needs to be changed. I mean, we really need the representation of both the genders, preferably women, because we are the people who are lacking. The guys are there anyway.
Mm.
So yeah, like the representation of women in STEM definitely needs to increase, because they bring the perspective that men sometimes don't have, and I mean it's the other way around as well.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I think it's like how you look at life. You need different perspectives and then
true, yeah,
pick what works. That's
yeah,
a like I have never, heard this perspective, and this is very interesting. Like it's not we're not trying to put one gender down. And usually when you talk about that, that's why I try to keep this question very open-ended. Like, what is your view on
right,
women in science? And more than yes, I understand that I'm also in the field of STEM, and I
yeah,
see on a daily basis what's happening, and I read about what's happening in the field of
yeah,
STEM and other areas of research. But like you always talk about silencing and this happening, but this is a very interesting way to convince the need for this. I think it's a very positive way to reinforce the importance of both genders and the perspectives. And I think it's a very good perspective. Yeah.
yeah. I think like more than being equal, we need to respect and appreciate the differences, because that's what
Right.
makes them different. Because like when people say they are equal, so they should get equal rights, they are not equal. They are very different. Both of them think extremely differently, but we need both those perspectives, because
Right.
they bring, like, one person brings what the other cannot.
Right. And it's the same with this like gender, right? Like, you and I are women, but I'm pretty sure our experiences and our perspectives are completely different. So when that can happen within the same gender, so obviously there's going to be a lot more opinions to
if you
offer
if you
or
absolutely ignore one gender, you are missing out on a lot. So I think
yeah,
that is a bigger problem. You just cannot say that just having like men in one profession, or just having women on in one profession, it cannot be the case. It absolutely
right.
cannot.
It's also like, people say that it is either this or that, and but in most of the cases you always have a third option which we're not open to, considering,
Oh,
which is right. Yeah, that's a very, very interesting perspective, and and I concur with it. Yes, that's completely right. Yeah, that's pretty much what I had, for today's podcast, and I'm pretty sure the audience, understand the pizza analogy. I'm pretty sure that's going to be the takeaway, and we're not going to look at pizza the same anymore like you do. Um, and yeah, so if any of you have any doubts or like any questions that you want to ask Utkarsha, I'm going to link her. Twitter profile, a Twitter handle to the podcast in the description, and you can reach out to her on any of the social media. And you can also look up and read about her research. So I'll try to add as much as possible, and I'll also probably link up the blog post that you had written for Bolded Science, which talks about the pizza analogy. And if people want to read about that, they could do that. So yeah, thank you very much. And the audience, as always, please feel free to ask your questions in the comments. Keep it clean and um, try to save as much as electricity or our energy as possible. Um, and be curious, stay curious, and nothing is rocket science. Yeah, bye.